Greetings and welcome to this latest installment of the Senturus Knowledge Series. Today we're pleased to be presenting to you on the topic of Cognos 11.1.6 new features, including demonstrations. So our agenda today, we'll do some quick introductions. We'll cover the meat of the presentation, what's new in Cognos 11.1.6, and then stick around while we do a brief Senturus overview, give you some additional generally free resources and the aforementioned Q&A. Our specific agenda today will cover new features in 11.1.6, specifically in the areas reporting, dashboarding, geospatial mapping, Jupyter notebook support, data modules, AI and advanced analytics, and the Learn panel. Our presenters today, I'm pleased to be joined today by Michael Peter, who's a Senior Offering Manager of the BA Partner Ecosystem, Data Science and Business Analytics at IBM Canada, winning the award for longest job title in history. With over 20 years of technical sales experience with Cognos and IBM, Michael has a deep understanding of the BI marketplace, building on his varied roles as a field seller, competitive analyst, demo designer, and new product evangelist. He now focuses on strengthening IBM's partner ecosystem for the entire analytics portfolio. I've had the pleasure of knowing Michael for, gosh, I don't even want to say how many years now, but I think our respective photos belie our ages a bit. My name is Mike Weinhauer. I'm the Director of Training and Content here at Senturus, and I've been doing business analytics in some form or another for over 25 years now, and I host these webinars. So we generally like to get a feel for our audience and what their environment or their opinions are like here. So we have a question for you today, and that question is, what version of Cognos are you currently on? So if you could please vote. And are you currently still on 8? Are you on a version of 10? Are you have you upgraded to version 11.0? Or are you on one of the versions of 11.1 at this point? All right, we'll close it out and then share the results with you. So vast majority, between a little over a half, are up on 11.1. Another quarter of you are back over on 11, and then 16% on 10 and none on 8. So I think that's probably not too surprising. Alrighty, great. Thanks for sharing with us your information about your environment. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Peter for the core of the presentation. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael, and appreciate that very long introduction. My title does get to be a bit lengthy. I will mention I'm actually not in Canada, though. I work with the team up in Canada, but I'm actually down in the New Orleans area myself. But I'm really excited to be here today. I love doing these sessions with you guys at Senturus. And I am actually joined by somebody in Canada. Many of you may know Chris McPherson. He is our Senior Offering Manager, the lead offering manager for the Cognos Analytics product. He is sitting behind the scenes with us here, ready to answer all of those questions that we expect to come in. So he'll be joining us vocally at the end of the session and be able to, we'll be tackling some of those as we go along. So as Michael introduced, a lot of new features coming here in 11.1.6. Hopefully most of you know where we are kind of on the journey of Cognos. 11.1 was a very major release for us about 18 months ago. And we have been continually, about every quarter, making a new release, sometimes bigger ones, sometimes smaller ones, different things going in. But they all really have centered around the themes that we built 11.1 to address. So the things you're seeing today keep in line with the idea of infusing AI throughout the entire product. Looking at our reporting and dashboard journey and how do we make or straddle that line of power and capability that you experience in reporting, along with the ease of use that you need in dashboarding. And we're continuing to sort of move each of those toward a center type of idea. So making reporting easier and making dashboarding more powerful. And so you're going to see some examples of that today. Also some ideas of extensibility. How do we make Cognos Analytics more available and open to use in conjunction with other technologies? So some ideas of that today you'll see with what we're doing with Jupyter Notebooks, as well as a couple other things. So with that, I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between demonstration and the slides. And since you've seen a lot of slides already, we're going to go ahead and start with some demonstration in the reporting area to highlight some of the new capabilities that we've put in there. Now, as I mentioned, let me just go into full screen here. As I mentioned, and I tell you, I'm just going to do a double check here to make sure my, okay, I am still logged in. As I mentioned, in reporting, we're constantly trying to make things more functional and interactive so that reports don't have to be necessarily static. And one of the key things we've introduced in this release is something we call the data table. And this is going to give the report authors the ability to insert an object that allows a lot of nested interactivity. This is something that historically people have used maybe JavaScript or something to do. Well, now it's in a control right within the product. And what makes this approach very unique and powerful is that we are actually using browser-side caching to bring all the data in. So the responsiveness of the control and the data within it is quite good. As quickly as I can scroll down or open and close things, you'll see the display change to see the things that you want to see. So that gives you an idea just initially of how the performance is being addressed in this. So even with extremely large sets of data, it can handle the performance that you would expect. Up at the top, the control has the ability to have inline filters, so I can very quickly change what I'm looking at on each of these, select the items that I want. From a functional standpoint, the end user can size columns to get the things that they need to see there. You also have the ability to include some custom indicators along with the numeric and categorical data that you have displayed. So very functional, very interactive. Now, we'll mention this is only in HTML right now. We do want to get it into PDFs, but that is a little bit of a future item. So what about creating these? I'm going to go into edit mode here, and we will see that it's nothing different from what you would expect normally. If I open my insertable objects window over here, you'll see we now have the data container, or excuse me, data table within the data container folder. If I were to drag that on, it looks pretty much like a list. I simply drag the items I want from my available data sources, and it will display as such. Now, the thing that happens, though, to give the control really is over in the properties. So let's go ahead and select this properly here. And we can see some of the individual properties that we made available to give you the control that you've seen me do. So first of all, the grouping and summary allows me to select which group I want to, or which columns I want to be able to group, and which ones are left over as details. So it automatically segregates what it can. You need at least one detail category. So in this case, it identified product line. And then as I select one of these on and off, you will see that it will take away those groupings of those particular elements. It would just simply do something like you see here. Filters are independent, so I can still leave filters on even though I don't have the grouping on that. Some of the other capabilities you can see here, I just mentioned the ability to do the column resizes or the filters. Those are controllable. Nice little item here, the snap to row. When I've got a big set like this, you can see if I just start scrolling, I've got the ability maybe to end up with something along the top here that looks like that. Well, if I don't want that to happen, it's just a matter of switching over to yes. And now when I scroll, if I try to stop, it's going to automatically adjust it for me. Just a nice little feature, again, from an ease of use standpoint. Couple other things to control. I have the ability to control what the indicators are here for my collapse and expand. Very easy to do. And you may have noticed I do have the ability to control the summary and or where I want these to appear, whether as a footer or a summary in the summation. So again, just a lot of capability right within this control as we've released it today. But also we're going to continue to expand this to make it more functional as we go forward in the future. So that's the first item within the new reporting capabilities. The next we're going to introduce is the idea of drill up and drill down within OLAP sources. So if you're working with a Power Cube or TM1 or some of the other multidimensional sources that Cognos supports, we now have the ability to do drill down and drill up, similar to kind of what you may have seen in the past with products like PowerPlay. That is, I can simply within the chart I have here, if I wanted to drill down, let's say on Americas, I can double click that. It's going to drill down into the next level of the hierarchy and give me the data there. What's really neat about how we've implemented this, though, is you've got full granular level control. So I selected it down at the region level. I also have up here the other dimension involved is my time dimension, and they intersect in the bars themselves. So if I were to drill down, for example, on Q2 of United States, it's not only going to take me to the next level here in terms of United States, but notice it also drilled down on the time dimension for me. So depending on where I select things, let's say I wanted to go back up a level, I can drill up just on time while maintaining the drill down on my region dimension. So a lot of flexibility, capability there, and that automatically pretty much invokes when you have a multidimensional source. Another capability we added into reporting this go round was multidimensional, ability to have multi-measures on the same chart. So you've noticed over here on the right, I did create this from the same query that's on the left. So as I did the drill downs, this kept in sync. But the key element here was the fact that I've got revenue and sales target both displayed on the same bar chart. And this is available for, column charts and bar charts in this case. So introduction real quick there for some of the things we have in reporting. I'm going to drop back over to the slides a little bit now, and we're going to introduce some other things. Come back to demo in just a second. So let's just go back, into full screen mode. And just to recap, my mouse will find my screen. There we are. Data tables, we talked about these. I expanded, should it expand, collapse. Again, the key thing there is the speed because of the browser side caching. But again, you can read through some of this in the deck when you get it. Talk a little bit about the visualizations, multi-measures, drill up, drill down. Next, we're going to go take a look at dashboards. And I'm going to spend some time in slides here because in dashboards, a lot of the changes we've made are a little bit more conceptual in some ways versus specific features like I just showed you there. And the key elements are around the improvements we've made to the UI. Now, I mentioned that 11.1 released about 18 months ago, and dashboards were a huge part of that in terms of the overall flexibility and capabilities we built into them at the 11.1 level. But we've also learned a lot in the past 18 months in terms of the usability, how we see users interacting with the original design. And we've made some pretty significant changes in this release. And it's important to recognize these because when you first go into 0.6, you're probably at first it's going to be maybe a little foreign. So just recognize, but I think once you get used to them, you're going to see it's definitely a move in the right direction. So a couple of these are how we've now docked the toolbar at the top. Now that is optional. I'll show you that in a moment, as well as changed how you interact with the visualizations on the chart. It doesn't have to go in and out of focus mode. It's going to be available to you on the right-hand side of the screen, and I can show you that as well in just a minute. The other thing, a little more focused in terms of authoring improvements is the ability to unit formatting. Everybody should be familiar with the format capability or the format dialog here on the left. Now you've got the ability to do some number labels, so it manifests itself as an additional label on the value. The ability to, on the consumption side, I mentioned that you don't have to go into focus mode when you're doing the new authoring environment, but we've also introduced focus mode to the consumer. So now if I'm on a dashboard that I'm not editing and I want to go in and see something in more detail, I can do that. Wasn't available before. And then finally, before we get into the demo, the ability to handle a expanding collapsing across tabs, similar to what I just showed you on the data table, but built right into a cross tab in the dashboards. This does work only with OLAP sources. At the moment, we do want to introduce this with navigation paths, but for the moment, again, only the OLAP sources. So let's, again, I'm going to drop out of this for a moment and go show you some of these things live that I just mentioned. But again, hopefully that orientation will make it easier to understand what I'm getting ready to show. So let's now go into our performance dashboard. This is just one of the samples, nothing fancy here. But as it launches here, you will see, first of all, I'll key in on a couple of the specific items that I mentioned at the outset. We can see, for example, the drill up, drill down capabilities here, expand and collapse type of thing within the crosstab. Over here, you see a live example of that points. I'll also mention, it's an upcoming slide, we've also introduced the capability to do categorical colorization in your maps. So previously our maps only had a sort of a continuous distribution of colors, sort of a heat map look in many cases. Now I can use discrete values and change the colors of the map contents accordingly. So again, some of those specific features. Now, with respect to those changes that I was just mentioning to the overall UI, you'll notice that I now have the focus, or excuse me, the expand button here, allowing me to go into focus and see that singular chart on my display. This is going to be very helpful if, again, if I'm a user needing to take a closer look at a specific element on my dashboard. I don't have to be an author or have edit rights to do that. The capabilities that you would expect in terms of being able to change the visualization, pinning it, all of those sorts of things, interaction with the filters, those are now displayed here across the top. So a very common type of use case for that information. Now, if I do go into edit mode, we'll be able to take a look at some of those other changes that I was mentioning. First of all, notice that the bar up here, we've moved some of the things from the, trying to get rid of that. There we are. We moved some of the items that were somewhat distributed. Some were sitting up here in the menu bar, and some were just hidden behind this. Made them a little clearer to see. So I've got my filter pane here. I can turn off and on very easily. Properties pane still here, like we would expect. But now notice we've got the ability to go to the fields. And as I look at the fields, I'm now given the specific fields for the visualization that I've selected. And that allows me then to very easily construct a dashboard. If I open, for example, my data sources here on the right, I could very easily drag things over to this without having to open up the focus mode of each individual chart. So I think this is going to make a huge difference in the authoring process, make it a bit more streamlined and a lot faster in many cases. Now, we also added a couple of nice things over here in the filter pane. If I go over any of the particular elements that I've added here, I can see sort of the hierarchy of where this came from in the data sources. You know, something like country may exist in multiple data sources that I have, and just to be assured of I got it from the right one, or if I'm using it and not sure where I picked it from originally, this gives me a clear path of understanding where that particular data element came from. Let's see. Oh, the toolbar as well. Let me close these things down. Just get rid of that, and we'll get rid of that. Now, if you remember previously, when I clicked on a particular element within the dashboard, I'd get a flyout toolbar. Click again, it goes away, and sometimes that clicking can get a little bit crazy. So what we've done, again, keeping sort of industry standards a little bit more, we've put the dashboard menu bar now here docketed along the top. So it's always there. As I change a particular chart, it automatically adapts to the type of chart that I'm using. And so that it's dynamic in that way. If I did like the old way though, it's still available. I can undock it and it will now appear here. Again, turn on and off depending on how I click. But most of the people that we've worked with, and I myself as well, are finding to have it up here at the top is just more natural in the way that we're using a lot of products. Now, what hasn't changed though, just be aware that the ability to interact with specific elements of a chart, you still with the right click can get your toolbar there for those specific things that apply to that one single element. All right. Let's see, and we talked a little bit about focus mode earlier. I'm just trying to check my list here, make sure I'm hitting everything. All right, so I think that covers most of the capabilities we talked about in dashboards. And the next thing though, before I go back into the slides, I'm going to go ahead and go a little bit into the next section, which is around some of the things that we're doing with the AI changes. So I mentioned at the outset that AI and making it really pervasive within the product is something we're always doing, and we're always looking at ways that we can improve how it works. I'm going to go, let's use this data module. I'm going to create a new dashboard to start on this one and illustrate something that we've been wanting to or talked about doing since the beginning of 11.1, and it is finally here, and that is applying the machine learning models to individual users. Now, when we introduced 11.1, we brought with it the concept of machine learning behind the visualization that is used when a user selects, oops, let me get both of those there. When a user adds data, so I'm adding age and food and drink prep here, a fairly simple example, but what it's doing now is using the built-in machine learning models to figure out that, okay, given the distribution of this data, I have lots of ages, this point chart is probably the best way to display this. So that's the models that we built into the product making that decision. But what we've added here now is the ability to learn the user preferences. So if, for example, I decide that, you know what, I really want to see this as a crosstab, I can simply make that selection. Now, it's already in the background started its learning process, and it's learned that I've got a preference now for crosstabs. It's not going to apply it though just yet, and I'm going to just show you how this works a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and add this again, and you'll see if I add this in a second time, it's going to stick with this chart. And the main reason is that I haven't clicked save yet. So while it started picking up these cues, it hasn't committed them. And the reason we don't want to commit it yes is because I might be continually changing things. So until the user says, yes, I like this, save, it's not going to apply the learning. Let's do an undo real quick. I'm going to click save now. And doing the same thing, I got to give it a quick name here. I'll just leave it at new dashboard. And now that it's saved, if I click the age and the food and drink prep, I will bring that in, and you'll see it will bring it up now as a crosstab. And it will do that, in fact, with any data that it finds similar. So if I take, for example, all of these are kind of similar. Let's just take eating and drinking, since that kind of goes with food and drink. You'll see it will bring this up also as a crosstab, whereas previously it would have used the other one. Now, before you start thinking, oh, well, it's just picking up the last one, there actually is a lot of machine learning going on, because when I was playing with this earlier, the subtle, it looks at the type of charts that I'm picking compared to the originals and starts making deductions. I found that while a crosstab, for example, will pick up after one save, if I had selected a table instead, it actually took two instances, two saves of that, or two usages of that before it would recognize, oh yeah, he probably wants this more often. So it's really kind of cool how it's doing all of that to learn my preferences based on the models we've built in. Now, I've got the control over that. If I go into my preferences, you'll see that I can, let's go to my personal settings into advanced. We've now got here at the bottom AI learning. I can turn this on and off for myself. Also, an administrator can turn this on and off for the entire environment. And if at any point I decide that this isn't something that I like what it's learned from what I'm doing, or I want to start over, I simply click the delete usage. And now if I were to add this again, it's going to go ahead and give me the original point source chart. So AI learning finally coming in at the user level. Excuse me, I just need a sip of water. All right. Now, the other area that we've been focused on the AI, and hopefully everybody's had a chance to play with this, is the assistant. This is the natural language dialogue we introduced in 11.1 that allows you to use just simple word questions to do things versus the construction approach that I use to create these crosstabs you see here. One of the things we introduced in a couple of releases ago, if I can type, is this command create dashboard. Now, the create dashboard on its own is, my typing is not good today. If the create dashboard on its own, what it would do is use all of the AI built into the load process that it will go in and determine the things that are important and the correlations, and it will try to adapt and create a dashboard for you based on those as best it can. And it would often reveal some interesting things, but at the same time, since it had really no guidance, it would sort of sometimes could bring up some things that maybe weren't that useful. So what we've added in this release is the ability to get more specific. So if I wanted, for example, to say I want to see a dashboard for average earnings, let's add for people that are greater than 30 in age. Oops. Why can't I type today? There we are. And let's also add in another context, let's say for female. So I can take this entire set of context from this dashboard, this data set I have on time usage. It's going to process that through the natural language, and first of all, make sure that it can determine it, and say, yeah, I can do this. It will create a dashboard that has what it found based on its machine learning and the models it ran on things that are interesting, relevant, important to understand, or things that were statistically significant around all of that context. So you'll see it focused in on weekly earnings. The age range, notice it started at 30. If I were to look at the filter here, you can see that it's only, I thought it should have picked up female, maybe it didn't, but normally it would. It will take that context and just give you a much more advanced and focused dashboard to start with. And whether you use the create dashboard on its own individually or with the context, the key idea here is to start revealing things that you may not have thought of if you're not sure where to start. And that's a huge advantage with the product over other tools, or even just an approach where I'm just putting things on the screen, because again, it will reveal things that I often would not have considered in my analysis. So nice capability there. The last thing I'm going to show you here, let's see, what do I want to do? I need to drop back out to the welcome screen real quick. We're going to use a different data set on this one. I'm going to use the Explore actually with this one to show the last AI capability that we kind of introduced here. And this capability is really around the idea of time series analysis. As you know, we've done a lot of work in the Explore capability that has added the ability for it to give you more guidance and information. And let's see, I'm just going to go in here and we get some data on the screen here real quick. I'm going to use, let's just say, the customer lifetime value, and we'll use this expiry date. We drag that in, and what this is going to do, given I've got a ton of data in this data set, is give me a visualization that looks like this. And you can see how, in this case, customer lifetime value varies a lot, and it's in many ways, hard to make any significant sense of this with all the data points I have going on. But with the AI capabilities built in here, notice what we've added are some capabilities like this. I can see that the values have a strong upward trend. I may not have noticed that before. I've got, and certainly it's not immediately visible from this, that there's an upward trend built into this. Some of the other things here, there's 2 data points on 11.9 and 11.3. Kind of can see these 2 that are now showing to be statistically outliers based on this. They're unusually high. But again, given the normal flow of this data, I may not have really zoned in on that. So anytime that it can find time series insights like this, it's going to start showing them part, again, of the AI that we've built into this. I'm going to do a quick time check. I think I'm doing okay. But I think we're going to pop back over to the slides now and take a look further at those. And there we are. Go through some other things. Now, some of the things I'm going to show you today, or we're going to use some sort of inline recordings of the slides themselves, just a little bit easier. I think we're going to hit some of those as we go along now. So we talked about this, the online collapse and expand. In the dashboards, I showed you the new geospatial mapping capability with the categorical colors. We talked about that. These are some slides on the learning that we just mentioned in the AI. And again, that note there, I noted there's weighted recommendations. I mentioned that as I was talking about how, in my own experience, different charts learn faster or slower depending on how it related to our recommendations. So a lot of sophistication in that. We talked about the new dashboard creation. We talked about the natural language insights. And I didn't show you this one. This one's not great demo, so I'll just mention it here. One of the things we added in this capability was or the new release is a subtle change in the types of measures that we do address. In a data module, you've got the ability to have calculated measures inside a table component, but you also have the ability to create standalone calculations that may span several tables. Those are often or will be represented typically at the top of the chart, like revenue existed here. Previously, the AI would not use those standalone measures. In this release, they do. So any place where any other measure typically would be used, like in a relationship diagram that you see here, now those can be applied. Those can be used in some of the other advanced analytic features and things of that nature. Again, unless you specifically have these, you'd never notice it was happening, but it's important to know that if you ever had hit that as a limit before, you shouldn't see it in the new release. Now, data modules. One significant change we've made in data modules in this release is how we deal with new data elements that exist in the source data. So you can see the videos kind of going along here. It's going to loop through, I'll mention it. But previously, if you wanted to add, if you had new data, there was no easy way to do it. You kind of had to add the entire table over. It would then sort of resolve, okay, here's all the new things in. Now we've got the ability to quickly see the elements that are new. I'll let it cycle back around here in the video. It's talking about the metadata here. I'll mention that in a moment. But as you go through the elements, here's where we're getting into here. In this example, country's not in there, so I can click the used items or unused items. It will highlight those, whether it's an individual data element or an entire table, as we see here with product, and allow me to move those over easily. And on the left, you can see some of the things that examples of when it's useful. But again, just a nice change to the overall UI. As I mentioned earlier, the other item on the screen, the reload metadata, gives you the ability, instead of having to do that at a data connection level, I can now do that at a data module level. So a lot of flexibility now exists for people that maybe don't have rights to do the types of management or administrative stuff at a data connection level. It's now available for them here. All right, so let's keep moving. Next thing we're going to talk about are Jupyter notebooks. And this is an area where we're talking about the extensibility of Cognos Analytics. And you may be aware that in release 2, about a year ago, we introduced Jupyter notebooks to the on-premise, but it was limited to Python. In the new release, we are going to make available support for R. So the same way you could go in and code in Python previously, you can now use R code and get the same sort of interactivity and capabilities that exist here. And if you're not familiar with this, I do encourage you to go take a look, because if you've got data scientists on your in your environment and want them to get more integrated to the Cognos Analytics activities, this is a great way to do it, because the notebooks can be used or can access data sources from the Cognos environment. They can act as a data source for the Cognos environment. The charts, like you see here with the scatter plot, can be put right within dashboards. So that interactivity level brings a lot of power from your data science community right into the Cognos world. All right, keep moving here. Another extensibility that we're having or coming out in this release is the idea of the Watson Knowledge Catalog integration. Hopefully people are aware of Watson or WKC. Keep it easy there. It's a big part of our Cloud Pak for Data environment, as well as a standalone. But this is a enterprise class cataloging environment for managing all different types of data sources and connections and credentials and things like that. And what we're doing now is, by integrating it with Cognos, you can now leverage all of the data server connections in WKC directly. That means one connection into the WKC environment will enable all of the connections it has defined. So I could have 100 connections in WKC, and with one simple action, I can now make all of those available, along with all of their credentials immediately available in Cognos Analytics. So I don't have to go set them up individually. This is one of the first integration points we're going to see with Watson Knowledge Catalog. Some of you have been around for a while. We used to have into some of the predecessors of WKC, we had sort of lineage capability and things like that. You're going to see those sorts of things come coming in the future as well with this. And I think we've got enough time to see. I've got this actually is a demo we can kind of walk through, and this is showing the Cloud Pak for data and the catalogs. You can see various catalogs available within this environment. He's scrolling down just to find one that he's looking for. And again, this is in WKC. There's a Teradata connection in here that I want to maybe want to make use of in Cognos Analytics. All the credentials are already in place. The connection information to the database are all there. So now in Cognos Analytics, all the administrator has to do is then connect to that particular Watson Knowledge catalog. Now, you'll see in addition to the list here, the external catalog option is now available. Simply giving it the URL to that particular server, give it a new name here. He's going to provide some of the additional credential information. While he does that, I'm going to take a sip of water. And as this goes along, you've now, with that connection, been able to access any of the schemas that are available to in that particular catalog. And you can see, I think they may be using a slightly different one here because he's got a bunch that are in that CA test. He's looking for the one that has the Teradata connection. He's going to load the metadata from that particular connection inside WKC. He's looking down. Again, this is a recording versus live. So in this case, again, you can see all of those. He's found the one where it's showing the load process happening. And in a moment, you'll be able to see all of the tables that brought into the picture. So once I've got all of these tables available showing here as a connection, it's available inside Cognos Analytics as well. I'm going to go ahead and move forward. That's just the last part of the video. All right, the last thing we're going to talk about here is the Learn panel. And this is something I'm going to come back into the demonstration for real quick. This is, you know, when we talk about Cognos Analytics, one of the key things that we're always trying to do is increase the usability. And obviously the way the product works is one aspect of it, but also how a user gets information and guidance of how to use the product is an area that we're constantly looking to improve. We're constantly getting new readouts and data in terms of how people interact with the system to make changes. And the thing that we've done differently in this release is improve what we have over here in terms of the Learn panel. Now, previously, you know, if I clicked on the question mark, it's simply going to take me out to the Knowledge Center documentation or something like that. Now, right here in line, it can give me access to things that are specific to where I am in the product. So I'm currently on the welcome screen. And in that context, it gave me things like getting started with Cognos Analytics. It may give me videos that it finds useful, blog postings, anything that is relevant to what I'm interested in. You know, so this is what it shows, for example, at the high level. If I go in, let's go back over to our dashboard here. And if I now click on this, you're going to see it's looking again. And now instead of, you know, how do I get started? How do I create my first dashboard? If I were to look for something specific, say like calculations, it's going to look for information not just on calculations, but in calculations in the context of a dashboard. If I did this on a reporting screen, it's going to look at it in the context of reporting. So I think this is a huge step forward in making sure that the end user can find the type of information they want, having it in line. You know, the ability to see it right here, come over in the screen, do what I need to do. All of that is really, I think, going to make it a lot easier for users to get started. And I think that is the last demo component. The last piece of information I have before we want to turn it back over to Michael is on licensing. And okay, that was the Learn panel information. I think we covered all of that. And so finally, this is not really a feature, but I think a really important change that anyone that currently has analytics user licenses needs to go take a look at. And that is, you now have access to use the Explore experience. Again, if you haven't looked at this before, hopefully you have, given it's been out in the product for 18 months now. Personally, I think Explore is the biggest piece of 11.1, the most important piece of 11.1 that we've actually released, not to diminish the dashboard capabilities or all the things we're doing reporting. But my point is that when you look at how AI is now being brought into the picture, of allowing or enabling more users to do true data analytics, the Explore experience is where that happens. You saw that time series analysis with all of that rich detail over on the right-hand side, the guidance that Explore gives you. The fact that you can now make this available to far more users in your environment without any additional cost. We used to have to upgrade to an Analytics Explorer license. This now opens up that capability to a much broader audience, and I think it's going to make a huge difference in how your users really get value out of the Cognos environment. So with that, I think, Michael, I can turn the baton back over to you, and I'll go to the next slide.
Great, thank you very much. And stick around, everyone. We've got a ton of great questions, and continue definitely submitting those into the question pane. A lot of exciting new functionality there. If you need help trying to harness that capability, there's no one better to help you with that than the folks here at Senturus, whether it's helping create great effective dashboards or reports and leverage some of this new functionality, whether it's implementing new functionality like the data modules, migrating from Framework Manager packages to data modules, including things like upgrades and migrations. So we can help you with both quick starts as well as full implementation. And then we can help train you on all of that great functionality, both with public and/or private courses, all the way through to self-paced learning and mentoring with complete corporate programs and discounts therein. Real quickly about Senturus, we concentrate our expertise solely on business intelligence with a depth of knowledge across the entire BI stack. Our clients know us for providing clarity from the chaos of complex business requirements, myriad ever-changing disparate data sources, and constantly moving targets and changing regulatory environments. We've made a name for ourselves owing to our strength at bridging the gap between IT and business users, and we deliver solutions that give you access to reliable, analysis-ready data across your organization, enabling you to quickly and easily get answers at the point of impact in the form of the decisions you make and the actions you take. Our consultants are leading experts in the field of analytics with years of pragmatic real-world experience and expertise advancing the state of the art. In fact, we're so confident in our team and our methodology that we back our projects with a 100% industry unique money back guarantee. On the next slide, we've been at this for a while. We have been focused exclusively on business intelligence for nearly 2 decades at this point, and we work across the spectrum from Fortune 500 down to mid-market companies, solving business problems across many different industries and functional areas, including the Office of Finance, Sales and Marketing, Manufacturing, Operations, HR, and IT. Our team is both large enough to meet all of your business analytics needs, yet small enough to provide personalized attention. A couple other great resources here that we encourage you to visit, senturus.com/senturus-resources, for hundreds, literally, of free resources from webinars up all the way to our fabulous up-to-the-minute, easily consumable blog. On the next slide, we talk about our complete training offerings, as I mentioned before, in the 3 major BI platforms, Cognos Analytics, as well as Power BI and Tableau. We're ideal for organizations that might be running one or more of those platforms or both simultaneously, or those moving from one to the other, owing to our deep expertise in all 3 of these platforms. We can provide training in many different modes, as you see here, from personalized tailored group sessions to individual one-to-a-few or one-on-one mentoring to instructor-line courses and self-paced learning. And we can bundle that all up for you and mix and match to suit the needs of your organization. And then last one here before we get to the Q&A, on the last slide, we encourage you to visit our website. We have hundreds of different free resources on our website, ranging from product reviews to tech tips to our fantastic, easily digestible blog to product demos, and of course, a list of upcoming events with great webinars like this one. And so with that, we'll go to the last slide here, and we'll get to the Q&A. Did you want me to do that?
Yeah, Chris, I'm gonna let you start off on that. I really haven't had a chance to look through them yet.
Okay, sure. So, I mean, we've had a lot of questions around when 11.1.6 is going to be released. You saw some, great new features that Michael showed over the past hour. I'm pleased to say that we're expecting to have it in market tomorrow. So, something to look forward to for a Friday. You can go and download 11.1.6 as of tomorrow. The conformance page should also be updated, so you'll be able to see the latest supported environments, browsers, and versions of data sources and so on. So that should all be up tomorrow. Just on the topic of our releases and things like that, there's also been a number of questions around long-term support release and whether this is going to be our long-term support release. So no, 11.1.6 will not be the long-term support release, but we have decided that the next release, 11.1.7, will be the long-term support release. So we just finished planning out what will be in that release and the timing, and we're looking at an early Q3 target for that. So sometime in the July timeframe, that's what we're currently targeting for that next long-term support release. In terms of when 11.0.13, the existing LTS that's in market, when that will be kind of come out of support, we're looking at end of March 2021. So that should give customers between 6 and 9 months overlap, and to be able to plan their migrations and get all of those things in order. Just looking down the list, we've got some questions around our data science support. So there's a question around supporting R and whether this would require Docker like Jupyter. So it will. We will just be adding, like today, the notebook support that we have is supports Python only. And we're extending that to be able to support R. So you need the same infrastructure that the same install and configuration that you would use today for Jupyter, but we will also support R. Related to that, we have a question around notebooks being supported on Microsoft versus Linux. And yes, I believe it was as of 11.1.5, we supported the Jupyter notebooks running on Windows. The version that we're supporting today is Windows 10, but I think the team are looking at expanding that conformance to perhaps cover off some Windows Server versions as well. There was a question around 11.1.6 versus 11.0 and the memory and resource requirements. I know our current recommendation as a minimum is 16 gigs of memory for running that. Obviously, more is better, but I wouldn't expect to see wholesale changes in requirements for 11.1.6 versus our previous versions of 11. We did, require more capacity and more memory moving from 10 to 11, but in terms of our sizing, we haven't changed our sizing guidelines significantly in the past year. There was a question around, our mobile app, and is there a new mobile app on the horizon? So I'm pleased to say that there is. I know some of you probably have seen prototypes of it or perhaps designs, because we've had our design team at a number of customer partner events over the past year and a half getting feedback on the design. So we're finally at a point where we're ready to roll that out. We have, kind of a limited beta going on starting, I think, end of April or May 1st. It's just literally a couple of customers. And then the plan is to have it rolled out with our 11.1.7 release, so early in Q3. Sometime in the July timeframe. So this will be a brand new, for those of you who haven't heard or seen it, it's a brand new mobile app designed from scratch. It's completely different to the legacy mobile app that we have in market today. It'll really be focused on high interactivity, and it'll have a lot of the same AI-driven capabilities that Michael talked about that are available, using the browser and the full product. So the conversation assistant will be there. You'll be able to ask questions and generate visualizations and content using the mobile app. You'll also be able to pin visualizations and create favorites lists that you'll be able to track. It'll have alerting and thresholds and all kinds of other really cool things. So I'm pretty excited about it, and can't wait for Q3 to come along so that we can get it out there. So there was a question around Salesforce as a data server. So we do, I thought we did support that, so I did a quick check on our conformance page, and we do support that today on premise. We don't support it in our cloud versions. We are looking at supporting it on the cloud version as of 11.1.7. So that is something that has been targeted for that Q3 release that I just mentioned. So it is available on prem and coming soon to the cloud. So there's a question around browser-side caching, and does this refer to the local machine? So yes, it does. The interactivity that you're seeing, it's we're actually downloading some of the data to hold into the browser cache locally on the client machine, so that you have that snappy responsiveness that Michael showed, so that you can expand and collapse and apply filters and reorder things and so on without having to continually making calls back to the server, which will introduce latency and so on. So yes, that is being processed locally on the client machine. There are a number of questions around data modules and Framework Manager, and whether everything needs to be done in data modules, or whether we're what our plans are really around supporting Framework Manager moving forward. So what I would say to that is Framework Manager is still 100% supported. We have no plans to deprecate it or end supporting it. It works very well, and I know customers have a lot of investment in it. We are trying to gradually enhance how we some of these new AI capabilities. For an example, it's a struggle with DMR models, for an example. So we are looking to close some of those gaps and do a better job of supporting Framework Manager packages. Now, having said that, the new features that we introduce and the innovation that we coming out with, that will go into data modules. As I mentioned, Framework Manager is a pretty mature product. It does what it does very well, and it's absolutely the right tool for certain scenarios. But we've gradually over the past several releases been closing the gaps between data modules and Framework Manager, and I think that we're at a point where most use cases could be addressed using data modules. I know there's still a couple of gaps there. One being multilingual support and some advanced parameter maps and so on. But the majority of the use cases, I think, can be satisfied using data modules. And I don't think we were there a year ago, but I feel like we're at that point now. So there was a question around exposing data via APIs and whether we have anything on the roadmap to create a connection to an API. So in 11.1.7, we are targeting supporting MarkLogic and as a data source, and we will be expanding our support for web services as a data source from there. We had to start with one, so that's the one we're starting with. But that will be sort of the first step in in a longer journey around supporting those types of data sources. Excuse me. There was a question which I imagine was around some of the machine learning that Michael showed, but wondering whether this was Watson machine learning or one of those Watson APIs. We have developed all of this machine learning in-house. The smarts that Michael showed, excuse me, the smarts that Michael showed were all developed by us. We always do look at the various other APIs that are available through IBM, whether it be the Watson APIs or elsewhere, and the research organization, and we will take advantage of those when it makes sense to. But much of the smarts that you're seeing were all developed by the Cognos team internally. So there was a question around the AI assistant working for Power Cube sources and packages with either CQM or DQM. So as I mentioned earlier, we do support Framework Manager packages for the AI conversation assistant. This really does work quite well with relational packages. I know we have some work yet to do in supporting OLAP sources, both through the conversation assistant and in the Explorer. I know the capabilities there are fairly limited today with OLAP and dimensional sources, but we are working hard on addressing that. One of the first things we're going to be doing around OLAP support and making the whole experience there better for the smarts is around extending the forecasting and the predictive drivers to support OLAP sources. So that will make, drive a lot of value in both dashboarding and in the Explorer Studio. So lots more to come there. We are, doing a lot of work in general around having a better support for OLAP sources. The major sort of breakthroughs or enhancements we've done in the past couple of releases have been around the table control that Michael showed and the crosstab, so that you have a much more responsive, much more flexible, much more robust table and crosstab that will give you a much better analysis experience. So, we have done a lot of work there, but we recognize that we need to do more in the smarts area to bring that level of support up to where it is with relational sources. There was a question around the AI assistant feature that we have around creating dashboard. This was something I think we introduced in 11.1.4, and we've been continually making it better. But for those of you who are not familiar with it, in addition to just asking questions of the AI assistant and then generating visualizations, you can actually say generate dashboard. And what it'll do is it'll look at the data source that you're currently interacting with in the assistant. It'll look at the columns and things that you've been using, and it'll lay out a multi-tab dashboard for you based on that data source and some of those selection criteria. All of this is done with respecting your user permissions and your access. So, everything we do, every gesture we do in the product, security and access is of paramount importance. So we will always check to see what assets, whether the user has access to these assets, or whether these filters should be applied because of the perhaps row level security that's in place. That rest assured that will always be the case. So there's no chance that someone will be able to generate content using data assets that they're not supposed to see. So there was a question around dashboarding. So largely wondering about making the layout options more granular and the ability to limit the amount of white space between controls. They pointed out an example where the KPI widget, for an example, is a great, very useful widget. It looks great, works great, but there seems to be a lot of wasted white space around it. So we are definitely continuing to work on making the dashboard way more flexible in terms of formatting, controlling the size of fonts. We're looking at adding additional fonts, just the ability to lay things out better and control the amount of real estate that's used by the legends and things like that. So we are working on doing that, and we try to get a little better every release. I think you'll find that 11.1.6 will be better than what you had in 11.1.5, and I know there are a number of items targeted for 11.1.7 that will make it even better. So yes, we definitely know that we have some things we can still improve in that area, and we'll be doing that in the coming releases. I'll have to scroll down. Those are the ones that I had highlighted, but I see a number of them coming in. There was a question around upgrade, and whether the move to 11.1.6 would be, or 11.1 would be more difficult. If you're moving from any version of 11 to any other version of 11, of course you need to go up rather than back, but moving from one version of 11 to another version of 11 is very straightforward. I talk to customers about this all the time, and I know there's a mix of folks who some install over top, which you can do now in 11, but others still like to stand up a new environment, excuse me, next to it, and then gradually move their content over, like they've always done. So, both approaches are perfectly fine, but I wouldn't expect you to have any issue moving from one version of 11 to another. Moving from 10.2 to 11, we did make a lot of changes, so I would, there may be a little more involved in moving from 10.2 to 11. You don't have that installed over top. We're talking about a new report viewer. In some cases, you'd be moving your reports from static to interactive in some cases. So maybe a few more things to consider, maybe a little more testing required moving from 10 to 11. But as I said, any 11 to 11 upgrade should be very smooth. Now I know we're at the top of the hour, Michael.
Yeah.
Maybe all of these questions are going to be recorded, and we'll get back to these unanswered ones individually, right?
Yeah, I think that sounds fine. So I'll get that over to you. So if you want to advance to the last slide, firstly, I want to thank both of you for taking time out of your undoubtedly busy schedules to provide our audience with a great presentation and some valuable information. I want to thank everyone in attendance today for taking some time out of your day to learn a little bit from Senturus, and we hope you'll visit us over at our website at senturus.com. Give us a call at the 888 number there, or email us at info@senturus.com if we can be of any assistance with your analytics needs. So we hope to see you on another event soon. Hope you're all taking care of yourselves and surviving various forms of quarantining, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Bye now.